Welcome back to the PWI Convention 2021. I'm going to run a panel session. So I'm Rob Mason. Many of you might know me either as a colleague or as a client, maybe, when I was Chief Executive Rail Corp and New South Wales Trains from 2008 to 2017. So we're going to have a panel today. Our panel will discuss the challenges their businesses have faced during the COVID pandemic, how they overcame and managed these challenges, and what some of the challenges will be looking forward post-COVID, each offering a different perspective from their different businesses. So I'd now like to introduce the panel. So Jason Pearson, General Manager, Civil and Rail New South Wales ACT for CPB Contractors. Jason has over 27 years of experience delivering major infrastructure projects across New South Wales. He's responsible for the delivery of construction across the road, rail, water and other civil sectors. With a multidisciplinary delivery background, Jason has been key to the execution of major infrastructure projects across all key sectors, including the West Connex, M4, East Project, ICL at Enfield Container Handling Terminal, Northwest T-Way Project and Upper Georges River Programme. Jason is a highly communicative, personable and friendly leader who strives to build organic relationships with project partners. His ability to bring together agile, innovative and committed project teams ensures certainty of delivery and quality assets, long-term value for our partners, of their partners and clients. So he's joined by Braith Gilchrist. He's all also offshore, online. Jason, he's Transport Industry Director for New South Wales ACT for Oricon. Braith has been at Oricon for 5 enjoyable and rewarding years of his 25-year career so far. Braith's technical background was originally environment and planning, and later in the project development, and he has held previous leadership roles in these areas for government and consulting. But his passion has always been for exceeding client and customer expectations and a deep appreciation of the client's needs and how to exceed them. At the same time, he retains his value in sustainability and championing diversity. Braith continues to hold project leadership and governance roles on a range of Oricon transport projects, including Sydney Metro Central Station, the M5 motorway, while maintaining oversight across the breadth of Oricon's transport projects in the region. Joined with me here in the studio, Sam William, Director of Rail WSP. Sam has over 19 years experience. She is passionate and driven to lead and motivate large, successful, multidisciplinary teams. An engineer by training, Sam loves to apply her problem-solving skills in combination with her unflappable demeanour and a healthy dose of humour, and getting the best results out of her teams. Since joining WSP in 2004, Sam has worked throughout Australia, Southeast Asia on several city-shaping transport projects and has contributed to several major transport projects, including Sydney Metro Northwest, City and Southwest, and the West, WEX and CRL and CRE, and the South Island Line East project in Hong Kong. Sam's early career was focused on tunnelling and underground structures, where she designed and delivered underground spaces on several large D&C projects and gained significant experience in rock mechanics, excavation design, tunnel contracting and procurement. After this, her career expanded to include design lead and management roles on multidisciplinary projects with a focus on rail, metro, underground stations delivery. We've got some good people here so far. So Anthony Spinozzi, Operations Manager for ANRIC Group. Anthony has been instrumental in the continued growth of the ANRIC Group, one of Australia's leading civil and rail businesses. ANRIC started primarily as a civil company over 40 years ago, but has expanded to cement itself as one of the most influential, innovative rail businesses under influence of Anthony's extensive experience. In conjunction with building a solution-minded, reputable and driven, highly skilled team, Anthony has been actively involved in revolutionising rail construction practices through designing, engineering and developing custom ANRIC equipment. His practical approach to creating on-the-job solutions has prompted him to design and develop initiatives for safety, quality and the environment. Anthony has gained vast experience working alongside multiple stakeholders like Sydney Trains, ARTC and the majority Tier 1 contractors delivering a multitude of complex infrastructure. Anthony maintains positive, well-regarded industry connections in both Australia and overseas. Also here we have Nicole Waterman, our technical lead for Laing O'Rourke. Nicole was recently the project technical lead for Central Station Metro, working with Sydney Metro. She brings more than 20 years of experience in delivering complex, multidisciplinary infrastructure engineering projects across Australia, Europe, the Middle East and Asia in a range of sectors including rail, commercial, cultural and civic, sports and water and wastewater industries. Nicole is also a passionate advocate for increasing participation of women in the engineering sector across all levels of responsibility, and she regularly presents at high schools to encourage girls to participate in the construction and STEM mathematics, STEM careers. And finally we have Dale Curran, Associate Director Network Operations, Network Maintenance and Engineering and Maintenance Branch, Sydney Trains. Now that's a long title. Working in the rail industry for just over 20 years, Dale has built a deep understanding of rail infrastructure through a variety of roles covering construction engineering, project and programme management, design and maintenance, both in Australia and the UK. In his current role, Dale leads over 850 infrastructure maintenance staff and contractors that perform the preventive and corrective routine maintenance, as well as provide instant response across the whole of Sydney Trains network. So welcome to my panel. So there we are, that's our panel, and I've interviewed them all, and I would like to say right at the beginning, I congratulate all the participants of this panel and their companies for what they've managed to achieve during this COVID pandemic period. So first of all, Anthony and Rick are part of the construction chain, supplying specialist plant and operators. Look at the challenges you faced in lockdown 1 and 2. How did this impact on your logistics and planning?
Thanks, Rob. Challenge is probably an understatement, I'd say. This second lockdown has affected us and given us a lot more work to do on top of everyone's busy lives. I think probably everyone can agree. So, yeah, employing, it's challenged us in lots of ways, but we've overcome them by employing a few more people to help us with the bureaucracy and the management of staff, projects. We're in a different position. We have to deal with 15 different clients, as well as the government's guidelines, and everyone has their own take on them. So it makes it quite challenging just in that alone. Every day, every second day, there was a change. So to manage the well-being and the mindset of the staff, the client's mindset, because their project deadlines don't change, so it becomes quite difficult. But we got there in the end. There's some light in the end of the tunnel right now, so I think it's good.
Good thing we've got a tunnelling engineer as well then, isn't it? So that sounds like quite a nightmare for you, I have to say, in logistics and change. When we spoke, you talked about changing rosters every 5 minutes and trying to get gangs in place. But look, from the construction side of point of view, then maybe moving to the consultancy side. So Braith, I'm sure you must have had a different experience because you haven't got lots of people out on track in your job. So how do you cope with it? Yes. Well, I can't hear him. Can anybody else hear him? Ray's not sure if you're on mute or not. Okay, I think Brace, you might have been on mute there, so might come back to you in a second, because
maybe we're on mute.
Okay, so let's just move on to Jason for a second then. So Jason, you have some big projects out there in the community, and obviously you couldn't go and talk to the community in the COVID era. So how did you overcome some of that sort of stakeholder engagement things that you normally would do? Yes, you did letter drops, but you couldn't go and talk to them in big town hall meetings. So that must have been an issue for you. Can't hear him either. Okay. Jason, we can't hear you either. Okay, so
Great.
it's called agile and pivoting. Right. So we're going to come to Sam. Sam, you talked to me in the interview about some really quite tricky issues you had with Signal Box and how you were doing some work in the Signal Boxes. Perhaps you could tell us about the challenges you faced there and one of the network operators and how you overcame them. Sam.
Yeah, I think it's like we were saying before, that because the requirements are changing so quickly and different operators have different requirements, I think that the challenge for our staff doing commissioning was to keep on top of what are those requirements on the day. So we had full sort of everything planned and everything ready for commissioning, and then all of a sudden those requirements would change. So instead of turning up to a Signal Box in normal PPE, there'd be an overnight requirement for the guys to source rail appropriate hazmat suits, which you can imagine are not that easy to come by the night before a commissioning. But it was really just that challenge of keeping on top of requirements and making sure all of your safety documentation reflects that. And I think that's going to be an ongoing problem because there is still inconsistencies between the operators, the governments, as to what those requirements are like.
And how was it? You know, hazmat gear is not easy to actually wear, I imagine. So struggling around a Signal Box, struggling I suspect is probably the right word. How do they cope with that? I mean, you can't have 10 people in a Signal Box, can you?
No, there's very strict requirements on who can and who can't be in there, and I think that will continue as we go through the next couple of months and things sort of settle down a little bit. There'll be different requirements in different areas, so we're seeing across the states those requirements are very different, and it really is just making sure the staff are agile to be able to adapt to that. In that particular occasion, there was a last-minute reprieve, and I think the specially purchased, specially procured hazmat suits got packed in a bag, and they didn't need to be used that day. But it does go to show that you've kind of got to be ready for anything as you head towards those commissionings now.
I wouldn't throw that gear away if I were you.
No, most definitely not.
Just my own experience when we had the SARS epidemic back in 2008, 9, 10, something like that. In Railcourt, we bought almost a whole supply in Australia of masks for staff so we could continue to work. We eventually had to donate them to the health department because they were run out of their expiry date, but we never used them, and that was lucky. That's the sort of thing you want to have in the back pocket but never want to use them. So I'm looking for a thumbs up. Have we got our offline people back online? Braith, do you want to try saying something? No, okay, Braith, we haven't got you. Okay, so you're going to sit back and enjoy this, aren't you? So out of every crisis, there's opportunities. There's obviously some positive outcomes as well. So I'm sure there were some good positive outcomes. And Nicole, in my introduction, I mentioned your role in Sydney Metro Station. There can't be many more three-dimensional work sites in the whole of Australia than the Sydney Central Station. Complex jobs like that. So, but you know, you couldn't stop that work, so the show must go on. So how do you cope with continuing to build what is an enormous hole at Central Station?
Yeah, Rob, it's been a challenge to do that, and it's interesting to hear Sam's experience as well. It's very, very similar. We've had to be very agile across our country, as we say, with the state conditions change, but our safety plan, we're changing on a daily basis. We're meeting on a daily basis of what's happening and what was changing so that we could keep adapting and making sure that we could keep the workforce. Latterly, we ended up creating bubbles. Last year was much easier where we were still allowed to do some construction. The shutdown this year, like Anthony said, has been horrendous impact to our programs, but moving and keeping people working has been the main focus. And the bubbles have been really quite significant. We've got a large site. We had a large workforce of up to nearly 1,000 people for 24/7 the whole time throughout the construction phase, and that's been pared back to about 400 people. So you can see the impact on the construction program as being quite unique. However, we've created and came up with some really amazing logistics to be able to create those bubbles, create the timetable for workforce. Simple things like the crib rooms, making sure that there was access to and from the crib rooms at different times, deep clean, next workforce in. So it's been quite a challenge and a great learning for us on how to do this.
And when we discussed it, you also talked about having sort of one-way systems for people to navigate around that work site. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, that's right. We had to create corridors that were basically part of the bubble. So you had corridors on the site where our our track deck where we're working. You could have bubble 1, bubble 3. They could walk beside each other, but not touch each other and not pass each other. So you've got hoarding lines between each of the bubbles to make sure that we can still work and access around the site. It's made it a little bit isolating for the team, but they're certainly kept it safe.
And hopefully all those sort of experiences will stick with that site and with those workforce, that they have learned new disciplines about how to socially distance and how to actually take work safety plans very seriously. So I think that's one of the things that might come out of it. Now I'm going to try Braith again. Braith, can you try again?
Are we working?
Okay, I was given a thumbs up, but obviously not. Okay, so from Lang O'Rourke's Big Hole in Central Station, let's think about what Dale has in terms. He's got nearly 1,000 miles or 1,000 kilometres of track to deal with. It's not one big hole, it's one long, long railway. Dale, what sort of things happened to you in the COVID lockdown, and how did you have to cope with them? And what sort of long-term benefits you see you're going to come out of them?
Yeah, similar to the others, we had to get everyone ready. Moving in very quickly in between those changes to the public health order was really quite a challenge when you've got staff, as many of us do, spread around a wide geographical area, all doing different work, trying to understand how do we speak to the team quickly. We had to have the daily meetings as well to pass that information down. Getting the logistics of getting everything out there, the suits, the masks, everything else out there was really quite a challenge. I think from a positive standpoint though, the collaboration, particularly across Sydney Trains and even into health and across our contractors and partners, was really quite amazing. I actually don't think any of us would have made it if we hadn't been able to have the conversations that we did. The other thing I've seen, our engineers in particular have been great for us as maintainers. We've seen a lot more effort into how we, or a lot more depth into how we assess our work and the state of the asset. We couldn't get out there as well, so we were cutting back work, trying to make sure that we kept our people at home and they were safe. And that was something where we had to take a really risk-based approach to what do we keep doing so that we balance that safety of our people with the safety and reliability of the network. We still had to get all the essential workers the rest of us were relying on for our food and everything else to work. So it was really quite a challenge through that. But the way everyone pulled together was really amazing. The resilience of our staff and their agility, which came to the fore, was really quite astonishing.
Thanks. And so you obviously couldn't finish all the work. How did you decide what to work on and what to leave for later? And of course, you didn't know how long later would be, but you still would run a railway the next day. So how did you manage to do that?
Yeah, and it's funny. So we had to take that tiered approach. So a lot of our longer term work, our bigger work, our major possession work, we had to just go through that with a pretty sharp knife and cut a lot of that back and sort of sit there and say, okay, so what's that risk look like into the future? How do we hold that? What's that mean for our maintenance scope in the meantime? And then we started even cutting further back into our maintenance, our routine maintenance, and understanding, okay, where's the point at which we can or can't run that service? And it came close a lot of the time where as that was really ramping up and the numbers were really climbing up to that peak that we hit in New South Wales, we were having some serious conversations about whether or not we'd be able to keep things running. So to dive into that risk assessment, looking at the age of the asset, really balancing what's the history of the TMP, why does it go through, and what's it trying to achieve. The engineers really had to dive into that and understand how far could we push this limit in the short term and what was that impact later, which I think that'll be the big challenge for us going forward, is catching back that impact later.
And for those who've been in the railway for many years, just be aware that the Treasury man, will be after all that money you've saved, and we'll have a big backlog of work, so make sure you defend that hard. Let's give Braith a try again. Braith, are you there?
Can you hear me this time?
All right, we can hear you this time. So, how did you overcome the sort of challenges of the lockdowns? And you're a different sort of business from Anthony's hard plant work. You're a consultancy, so how do you cope?
It's funny. I was just about to start talking about how seamless the digital transition had been. But point in case here, it's not always seamless. I guess just first look. Apologies, obviously the tech hadn't worked. Apologies also that I'm not there in person. I am up on the Central Coast in beautiful Darkinjung country at a 2-day offsite. So look, yeah, would love to have been there in person. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like logistical challenges, which Sam and kind of others have touched on, but I think kind of overwhelmingly, certainly in the first kind of COVID phase, was a really great sort of pivot to that sort of remote working. Obviously, we're all professional base. Yes, there were some disruptions around some of our more site-based activities, but on the most part, we had well-established flexible work practices already in place that had been, and a Yes Flex policy that had been in place for a number of years. So that transition wasn't clunky at all. We were already kind of operating largely on digital workspaces, and so if anything, it just sort of accelerated through that uptake, the early stages. And I'd kind of heard some statistics around that time that we kind of shifted that over days to 90% remote working, with only a 3% loss in productivity over that time period, which is pretty amazing, really, when you consider the scale, really, of the challenge. Probably, I guess, just kind of touching again on that digital, there were probably more, the challenge was really sort of working around, well, how do we maintain our innovation, innovation culture? How do we run innovation type workshops, which have been completely sort of face-to-face up until that point? There's really great experimentation with different sorts of platforms over that time, which ones worked, which ones didn't, and then kind of landed on a Miro platform that we sort of currently use, and which has been really commonplace. So I think there's lots of silver linings in and amongst each of these challenges, particularly in that digital acceleration. And then, I mean, that's probably a bit of an internal focus, obviously. Changes as well in terms of how we're engaging externally, and that our clients are having, particularly around communications with, community stakeholders and the like, and sort of seeing a real shift there, more traditional face-to-face to an acceleration into digital engagement type practices as well. So look, lots of challenges, but then, lots of really quick experimentation and then responses into those, which has been really pleasing to see.
Good. Well, welcome back anyway.
Yes, thank you.
Jason, are you there?
Yeah. G'day, Rob.
Oh, we got Jason as well. So you had some community engagement issues to deal with. You couldn't go and talk to people. So how do you cope with that?
Yeah, well, like as Braid said, a lot of the technology, I think people adapted really quickly to obviously the lockdowns and how we talk to and connect with people. So, traditionally we do letterbox drops and those sorts of things around projects, and projects like Rozelle and Cross River Rail and even Warringah Freeway, they're using, a lot of people are a lot more tech savvy now, so they're able to jump online, see where they live in relative to what the project is, and some of the tools, for instance, down at Rozelle, where you can jump on the website, it's in Transport website, and you've got an interactive screen to see exactly what's coming up. If you want to see where they're tunnelling, you can see where the road headers are. If you want to see what's happening out on the road, similarly, you can see what's coming up for night shifts and all this sort of thing. So I think the way we're communicating, both amongst ourselves, like with teams and all that, I think we've all got really used to that now, and I think we're doing a lot more of that with the community as well. And I think that there's some huge benefits for that, because you can get really timely information out there to people as well. So. But I've got to say, the way people have adapted through all of this has been incredible. We've got some pretty amazing people we work with that have just, there's no playbook for this, and we've been able to just, as an industry, adapt and continue to work and find a way through things and keep people healthy and safe. So it's been really good.
I don't think you need to go and look at some video about where the tunnelling machine is. Your house is shaking, isn't it? That's what they're all saying in the newspaper.
Shouldn't be doing that.
You'll deny that, I'm sure, won't you? The windows are rattling. So anyway, so that's one set of stakeholders, the general community. So Sam, what about the other stakeholder being the client? How have they been with you and your colleagues? Have the clients adapted as fast as you have on the other side of the contract?
Definitely depends on the client, is what I would say. So others, some clients took longer to sort of set up their digital systems and be ready for working from home. But I think we're probably all relatively on par now. What we have seen is some real benefits in being able to share staff nationally. So clients that were once very parochial and I must see the staff that I'm paying for in this office every day, we no longer are seeing that as much as we have been. So we've been able to share staff nationally, work on different projects and give our staff opportunities that they probably wouldn't have had before COVID, which has been a real benefit. And it means that we can take some of those lessons learnt from particular locations and particular projects and translate them much easier to interstate projects. And also it has that benefit of being able to, I suppose, call on that international experience, which has always been there, but I suppose people are now more used to setting up a video call to talk about things and sorting things out for different time zones. So it's been really good in terms of, I think, bringing our company and our staff closer together.
That's good. So internally, people are doing better, being agile. I think the clients are being agile, and by the sound of the community have got some benefits out of this as well. So I think people have moved on. So I now want to talk about your people, really, because we've all been through hell and back, and hopefully we're coming out of it. But one of my roles in industry is director of TrackSafe, a harm prevention charity which the PWI actually sponsors. So we're very pleased with that as well. And we look after the well-being of the staff, primarily drivers and station staff who go through traumatic events. And I think everyone's been through traumatic events, whether it be their own family or their work colleagues. So first of all, Nicole, then Braith, and then Sam, maybe perhaps you could talk about how you've had to look after the health and well-being of your own people and not being able to see them every day. So maybe Nicole first, please.
Yeah, Rob, this has been really quite something special at Langerock. As we discussed, some of the health advice is changing daily. So we would have our senior executive would have their meetings very, very early in the morning. I'm guessing 6 or 7 o'clock. Then that will go down. The projects will get that information and the directions at 8 o'clock. And this is nationally across all of our projects. And then by 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'm telling my teams from the project leadership team down into the team. And by 10 o'clock, everybody has the same information that the exec had given at 8 o'clock in the morning. That started on a daily basis when things were changing very, very quickly. And then we swapped it down to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then progressively we got Tuesday and Thursday. And now we have something that's really, really amazing, and I think is here to stay with us, is we had 2 things. We had a senior leadership team meetings, which is about 200 people across our business joined together every Monday and Wednesday afternoons. And at 4:30, we get the updates of what's happening that week. And the second thing that happened, which is I hope is here to stay, is that our managing director, Cathal O'Rourke, would meet with and broadcast to the whole business at lunchtime on a Friday. So right now he does it on a fortnight. We have to be done by 12 o'clock so I can go and see Cahul's news this week. But it's been it's almost the same as what we call in New South Wales Gladys Hour, but it has been really powerful to reach everybody, no matter what the information, whether it's COVID news or what's happening on our projects, our project wins, our safety, whatever's happening across the business. So the communication has been opened up through the technology, as we were talking about, and has been really, really powerful, and everyone is feeling really connected to our business and what's happening. So it's been a real positive, and it's come from the well-being of our people, what we're trying to make sure everybody's well informed and being safe.
No, I don't think there are any secrets here, so we're really sharing good ideas here about how people have actually managed this well. So, Braith, you also had some good ideas there as well, I think, when we spoke earlier.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that was a really story from Nicole there, and I think for us it's been really important as well, having that kind of really clear, genuine communication at a leadership team level down, because as the point made, the kind of health directions were quite dynamic, so that was and in a really kind of compassionate way as well. And so I guess that's from a kind of top-down perspective, and then we just looked at I can't remember. I think maybe when we were chatting, we were talking about the kind of coffee catch-ups as one of the sort of regional sort of things that we tried to do, which was sort of last lockdown. So how do you continue to maintain those connections? So check-ins obviously really important, but they can be still quite virtual. While we weren't in the office, we were still able to meet, and so a member of the leadership team would go and sit at a cafe at a particular time of the week each week, and encourage people who lived in that kind of general area to come and join, chat, sometimes just co-work. So there was a bit of experimentation there around different things to do. When we already had like a lot of other members already had a really strong safety culture and safety shares at the beginning of every meeting. And what we found, is that they really took more of a mental health focus. And so it was really good opportunity for people to share the challenges that they're having, the way in which they're dealing with just all the complexity of the world, and then also to keep up to date with, any kind of, COVID-related safety incidents that were happening, and have that kind of shared and sort of cascaded through the business. And then probably the kind of more recent thing has been, at a regional level, we've had an external facilitator, kind of mindfulness coach, really, kind of run sessions, again, online sessions, extraordinary participation, hundreds of people join them, and helping to work through people with, skills, tactics, action plans, reflections, to help through, what has been a really complicated period with a range of, complexities in their domestic environment, while they're also kind of dealing with this complex new way of working. So, I guess there are probably a few other things that are going on at our workplace. Yeah.
So we're all looking forward to having that cup of coffee soon with everyone.
Indeed.
So Sam, I suspect people, because they weren't travelling for an hour each way, they're probably spending that hour on their computer at home working. So there's a real danger of people actually working too many hours. How do you have to cope with that? Do you have examples of that?
Yeah, I think we all know that fatigue and burnout in our industry is real, and it was real before a pandemic, and then you pile on top of that the extra stress and the extra pressure that goes with a pandemic and people's home situations. And I think that if anything increased the fatigue and burnout risk across the team. Making sure that people's work life doesn't bleed into their home life is far more difficult when people are at home and working in the corner of their bedroom. So making sure that people turn off, so having really strict rules about when the people log off and when you expect them to be contactable. And obviously flexibility is great, but making sure people are, I suppose, policing themselves to a certain extent, making sure they've got something to look forward to at the end of the day. Really using mental health and fatigue checklists so that people could check in with how they're going and probably point out things that they thought were normal that weren't. And then using things like stress leave or mental health leave so that people can get the break that they need, even if you can't go anywhere, just a break from work and a break from sitting in front of a computer. I think one of the things we heard from our team was it's a very different situation to be sitting in meetings in person all day than it is sitting and looking at a Zoom or a Teams screen all day. So being mindful that you may not be able to pack as much into your day as you probably would in person. So being really conscious of how that affects people and making people take breaks.
And that's true. We're all workaholics. All us railway people, we always work too hard. That's why retirement's so good. Look forward to it, folks. Now, as we come back to work in the working office, we talked about just outside here, some companies are actually coming back to work. But some people have had some real family benefits for either childcare, either benefits or disbenefits. How are we going to make sure that people have an equitable share of the benefits? So Sam, I think you mentioned that as well in your discussion. How do you have a virtual office? How do you share out the benefits equally?
Yeah, I think you mentioned commute time. A big one for a lot of the team is commute time. They don't have that hour or 2 hours on a train or a bus every morning to get to work, and that's been a real benefit. And I think a lot of people will want to keep that. So it's the big challenge for us, I think, will be as we go back to that shared environment or that hybrid environment, how do you keep it equitable between the people sitting at home and the people in the office so that people aren't missing out on information and opportunities? And you have to be really deliberate about your communication, I think. So making sure that everyone's online rather than half in a meeting room and half at home. Writing some really clear guidelines around hybrid working and what tools you use, like Braith mentioned, and what situations you use those in will become really important. But I think not only people with kids, I think people are just enjoying having A, family time, B, no commute time, and a bit more flexibility in how they do their work.
So that's positive, could be a very good positive culture aspect of the as we move into the hybrid area. Other positive aspects. So Dale, what about you? How do you see us looking forward in the positive cultural aspects of the organisation?
Similar to the mental health conversation earlier, we saw a big uplift in needing to provide that support to our people, and we were really lucky through transport more broadly and then down into Sydney Trains to see a lot of those programs starting to pick up. We also had people come in from outside and provide sort of resilience training or just teaching people how to care about their mental health. It's been a big uplift for us, and I think that's something we'll take forward into the future a lot. I think the other thing is going to be balancing that home and at office time and finding that right mix for people. I live down the south coast. I've quite enjoyed not having that hour trip every morning and every afternoon. But at the same time, I do miss the being in the office. So just trying to find that balance for our people. A lot of my people, it's been hard. They haven't had that home time. They've been at work all the time, keeping things running out there on the network. So that equity of being able to give them access to that flexible working, I think, is also going to come to the fore in the future. And hopefully we've learned some lessons through there. Our frontline people have picked up the technology as well a lot. So we've been... our teams have been spread into different depots, which we had, as Rob knows, spent a lot of time getting rid of in the past. And so that's been interesting, getting people out there using the technology, understanding, okay, how can that work with a phone and versus a laptop, and seeing people pick up those skills has been great. And I think we'll carry that forward a lot. We'll also pick up some of the lessons from the risk assessment stuff that we've done, Rob, and try and take those into our TMPs more broadly. And what can we do with that if we get back to that work sort of thinking? I think that'll be an interesting challenge for us to find the right balance there. So yeah, I think that's where we'll be focusing on in the future and some good outcomes on that.
So if you remember when the shutdown came, and it was literally all construction sites had to close, I think within 48 hours you could go sort of put them into hibernation. I think, Jason, you were halfway through a possession, weren't you, at that time? And you can't stop a possession, we know that. I mean, all railway, you've got to get the railway back at the end of the weekend, but you were halfway through a possession. What did you do?
Yeah, look, the team on line-wide, they absolutely, I think it caught everyone in the industry, that Saturday, around lunchtime. And I think that was what's so impressive, as a group, that people were able to, mid-possession, that was on line-wide. Parramatta were out in the middle of the road. The teams out there were busy working on the light rail out there. And I think they very quickly close the sites up and transition to working from home, because that was during the pause. People did that, incredibly quickly. Normally you look at how, the amount of planning goes in for a Christmas shutdown and things like that, yet literally in 24, 48 hours, people safely closed the sites down, finished possessions, obviously didn't affect reliability of the road or the rail network, and it was pretty impressive that what the teams are able to do. So, yeah, that was, it was great to see at the time. Albeit it was a really difficult time for people, obviously with the uncertainty of what was coming next.
Yeah, so it's impressive. I don't know if those who watched the Sydney Trains SBS programme, I think it was, the possession of the Sydney Harbour Bridge with all the track ripped up. Thank goodness it wasn't that weekend anyway, otherwise it would have been a bit awkward. But talking about possessions, so there's a great discipline that goes into possessions. And Nicole, we were talking about the thinking behind the planning that has had to go in with COVID here. You've had to plan more the jobs. Can you tell us a bit about because everyone thinks productivity is going out the window, I think. But some of the examples you gave me, actually productivity has improved through better planning. So Nicole, perhaps you could give us an example of that.
Yeah, Rob, it's been a really nice blend for us at Langerock. Central Station and SSJ, a number of our metro projects there, we're building a building in a rail corridor. So we have many of our team have a building background and our rail team, and I've always liked the planning and the precision that the rail team give us, because they know a possession is a possession and this is what you need to do in that possession time. This has been ramped up a little bit through COVID because the workforce has been restricted so much around, particularly when the workforce, many were in the LGAs of concern, so they couldn't come to site. Many of our own workforce were the same, but they could really think through and plan what they needed to do. We had some waterproofing happening in our Central Walk section, which would normally take five operatives working for 5 days to waterproof this zone. Because we couldn't have that many people in that space, we had 3 people do it in 3 days, because we had the pre-planning and the sequencing and making sure everybody was in line and not tripping over each other. And that's been a real lesson for all of us, to just really plan ahead and make sure we've got everything down to minutes and 15 minutes sections of how well we can plan this and make sure we've got it all in process and hand it over at the end of because you're then relying on internally, handing one trade to the next trade to the next trade. So it was a real success for that project.
Yeah, and when you saw the Sydney trains Sunday night on the Harbour Bridge, you could see them every minute counted, every safe second minute counted for them. So that was, I think you said 5 people 5 days, you did 3 people 3 days. That's a huge improvement. Let's make sure that we capture that productivity improvement through good planning. But I suspect there's been some real disasters there in terms of productivity for people like Anthony, where you've tried to move people interstate. Anthony, how's it been for you in terms of getting people moving around and resources generally?
Yeah, it's been difficult, obviously, but being able to, we're modular, so we're working on all different sites, as I think it's got mentioned earlier, the bubbles. So that came into play. We don't need necessarily people coming back to our office or our yard, so they're either working from home and working on site. But the resources has definitely been fun. I think we're fortunate that we're in this industry, ANRIC's in this infrastructure industry, because we've all been working. I think we look at the broader community, and it's been pretty dramatic, I think, for a lot of sectors. And I think we're very lucky that we're here in this industry, and we literally stopped for the 2 weeks. After that, it was every site picked back up again and got on with the show. So we had to find different ways of bringing people in. At the start, it was 2 different sort of aspects. At the start, we found it was a little bit easier picking up staff and training them from different parts of the construction industry. So we saw an influx of people, which was great, because then as it transitioned over the past few months, you've started to feel the effect of no one coming in from interstate or overseas. So that sort of tap's been turned off, which now it's actually starting to affect us further. But we're lucky that we picked up on the different stream of staff that we could bring in and train, and we sort of focused a lot more on in-house training and different ways of implementing training. Obviously with COVID's being difficult, but our team's persevered, and we're still managing quite well considering everything going on. So yeah, it's been fun to say the least.
Fun?
I suppose what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, so
It's true.
we'll keep going.
And to echo that, we are lucky we're in this industry, because many industries, tourism, hospitality, have been absolutely decimated. So we are extremely lucky, and lucky for the subsidies that governments have put in. So let's look towards the future then. So what's the pipeline looking? Now, Dale, you've got a bit of a backlog there. So how are you going to do your backlog?
Yeah, we have got a bit of a backlog. So we've got similar to the construction industry, we've got a lot of maintenance now that we need to have a really good think about how we tackle what and in what order. And so we're working through that. We've got at least the lockdown period's worth of work, and that's of course has a flow-on effect. Once we can't get something through a possession, well, that possession's not for a while longer now, so that means the next lot's push forward, and you kind of got that flow-on effect over a number of years, we think. What's interesting for us is trying to balance that, the want and need to get that back for our customers and delivering a quality service. As with our safety of our staff, we're not entirely through this yet, and we've got the general risks that we all deal with every day in this industry to deal with. We don't want to be rushing. Inside that, the constraints, as you mentioned, Rob, of money and access, and we've got to get construction back out there again, because that helps us as maintainers, but we've got to keep that maintenance flowing. And I think the real balance is going to be working with partners and learning the planning lessons. We had a lot of replanning to do as well, so learning those planning lessons, getting that out there, so that we can use those access opportunities efficiently. I think that's going to be our challenge going forward.
That's a positive note anyway. So Anthony as well, so you don't just work in rail, do you? So you've actually got a pipeline of work, hopefully?
Yeah, we've got a bit of a pipeline, so I think it's, like Dale was saying, it's going to be very busy in the coming years. I don't know how we're going to cope with it, to be honest. Everyone's going to want everything done on top of everything else that had to be planned to be done. So yeah, we've got a bit of construction going on and developments that are happening. The economy's still strong, so we're fortunate again. I think we'll yeah, we'll have to see if these borders reopening brings in new working holiday visas, and that'll boost the workforce here in Sydney. So I'm hoping that will come soon, maybe after Christmas. But yeah, it's definitely going to be, there's definitely plenty of work on. I think it's going to be a good challenge for us to sort of capitalise on it somehow and not let it slip past.
That's good. So I think we're all aware of Infrastructure Australia's pipeline of work and all the various infrastructure agencies within the states. There's a lot of work there. But Braith, does it sound like it's well planned, that work? All those projects coming in?
We're hearing, there's been some kind of promising, yes, around kind of coordination. So, but yeah, I mean, look, an obvious point, obviously, that there is still a significant pipeline. I mean, we've kind of touched on the backlog in maintenance works. There's still, an existing significant pipeline of future substantial projects. And not only in region here, but obviously in other jurisdictions. And so yes, we've heard signs of cross agency, but improved cross agency collaboration. Again, not just across transport agencies in region, but in other regions. But yeah, look, the challenges are very real. To grow the workforce required to meet those, that forward workload, and having the borders closed, limiting that skilled kind of worker access, is really a challenge for all. And then you look internationally at what's kind of going on, and a lot of the infrastructure-led recovery that's being flagged, internationally, the US and the like. We've got some challenges ahead.
And of course, from our perspective around the table here, we're all on one side of the contract. What about the client side? Can the client side actually cope with this huge pipeline of work they're all talking about? Who shall I ask on that one? So, Jason, you're sitting there very calmly there at home, probably, with a bit of tunnel behind you. Can the client side across the whole industry cope with this pipeline of work?
Well, I think there's a huge program coming, as everyone said, and I think a lot of the way the clients are working with the industry, particularly in a lot of the interactive processes, and then I think the way that's those tender processes has shifted a bit, which I think is really helpful. So I think that allows you to openly talk about the pipeline of work, how to deliver them, the best form of contract, and obviously where the resources are as well within the industry. So. I know, like one of our jobs with line-wide, part of the challenge was bringing welders up from interstate, during the middle of lockdowns and things like that. And the teams worked pretty well, I think, together, and with Metro and that as well, just to make sure we had people there when we needed them. So I think it's getting those teams in those open conversations around pipeline timing and that, so that they both obviously from a client perspective and from a contractor perspective. We're ready to develop all these great projects that are coming up.
And you mentioned their tender process. So some changes there. Is the psychology of the client changing there in terms of the tender process and the style of contract?
Yeah, look, we've seen some, particularly of late, and there's some really good examples of, these complex projects having really interactive, and collaborative forms of discussions throughout that process. And I think that, that's really helpful because it, just gives you more certainty as a group, whoever is successful with it, to actually deliver the project successfully. So, yeah, it's definitely, we're seeing a shift there, which is good. Good.
And then one final question is we had the Young Achiever coming in, Mel, just before this session. I don't know who wants to talk about it, maybe Sam and Nicole. What about the youngsters, those who normally sit by the experienced grey-haired male or female who learn from us? How are the youngsters coped in this COVID? How are we nurturing, how are we actually mentoring them? Maybe Sam, can I come to you first?
Yeah, I think it's had to be a much more deliberate process, so buddying up young people as they come into the organisation to make sure they've got that touch point. But I think that will be a real focus of getting people back to the office. So not necessarily the people that can sit at home and get everything done that they need to get done, but that real benefit of pairing up and sitting next to those people with experience. I think you can't go past what you can get done in an office. So I think the focus for us will be to get our young people back, both from a social point of view, because that is a big part of why you work in a team, but also to get that mentoring and that face-to-face learning starting again.
And Nicole, your thoughts about how we mentor the youngsters, or the ones who are coming up to the start of their career?
Yeah, I would echo Sam's comments there as well. We ran our intern program last year, and in particular over the summer, our Victorian colleagues some of them did their whole internship from home, working from home. So that's tough. But what we also had them doing was also working in what the occupations in Victoria. So you could still plan ahead to get there and make sure that they get the experience of working with Langerock, working in a construction, working in the field, and also helping plan it and achieve what we need to do in the paddock. It's hard, and I think the focus is now to try and make sure we had a buddy system exactly the same. We have buddy systems throughout the business, and it's been very, very powerful, and we need to keep doing that to make sure that people are engaged and understand how we're delivering and what that feels like to work and get the reward that comes from building a railway. Yeah, this is what we're all here for, because it's such a rewarding experience, and that's what I want to make sure that the youngsters get to experience that in particular.
So I think that's probably a message for everyone out there. We mustn't forget those who are in the start of their careers. They really need our support to make sure that they go on the right track and get the experience. I can remember when I came here to Australia, and I'd had track designers who had never actually been on site seeing a commissioning of a set of points. And you think, what the hell's going on here? So they actually need to go and see the experience, sit next to somebody who's actually done it before. So anyway, thank you everybody to the panel. Thank you for your generosity, both in the interviews I put you through, but also today. Thank you for your generosity more than anything else about telling your stories of the hardships that you and your colleagues have been through, but also the benefits you've seen, the outcomes. But more than anything else, I really want to say from my heart, thank you for looking after your own staff. It is very, very humbling to hear some of the stories and the way you've actually managed to modify the company to support your staff. So thank you to all on the panel.